I'm Rebecca Kaplan. I'm here for Comics Beat. Thank you to our sponsors, Mad Cave and Global Comics. And we are here with the Day of Blood team, Jackson Lanzing, Collin Kelly, Christopher Cantwell, and the editor, Heather Antos. Day of Blood, about Klingons.
It is. Well, it's kind of about everything. But
Yes.
it just happens to be set on Kronos, because things are really going bad with the Klingons.
Yep.
Is this also Dominion War?
So the entire Star Trek line right now takes place right after Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. So effectively, we are the sequels to the shows that came, before the end of Nemesis and the beginning of sort of Lower Decks. So everything that we're doing takes place about a year and a half before Nemesis and about, 3 years post-Dominion War. It's a period that's never been canonically essayed. It's really exciting for us because it's kind of a great playground where all of your favorite characters are still alive, they're still young, they're still in their prime, but they're all dealing with the aftermaths of the sort of ends of each of their series. Mm-hmm. Voyager's dealing with coming back, DS9's dealing with the end of the war, Next Gen's dealing with what it means to sort of be in the very last stages of that journey before they kind of split up, before obviously their eventual reunion in Picard 3. So it's been this really exciting time where we all get to kick off new stories that interlock like a shared living universe. It's Marvel or DC. It's a full universe of Star Trek characters and stories that can live across a line.
Never been explored, like not even in the prose novels?
No, of course they have been, but the prose novels and a lot of the stuff that's happened, they capped that entire continuity off. They recently did a whole series called Coda that basically took all of that stuff out of canon, in large part because the way that Coda worked was it set all of this stuff in place that now has been fully invalidated by Picard. And so because of that, we weren't able to use that stuff.
But what
now
we are
everything
able
has
to
sit
do
on that canon.
What we are able to do is take information from Picard and Lower Decks and this amazing kind of like renaissance we've been seeing in Star Trek television and then comb that forward so that we can reverse engineer that continuity so that we sit within the perfect storytelling of Star Trek.
And for any fans of those novels, literally one of the core architects of that entire universe is our core notes guy at Star Trek. So we're actually we're interacting with those prose novelists. We're interacting with the canon. We're trying to sort of sit in this really exciting space now where we're all getting an opportunity to do something, now that there is stuff on either side of us, being able to tell stories that really fit inside of all of it. It's just been very exciting. It's a wild time.
Yeah, because it is so complicated with the canon. Because I do know, like, Prodigy pulls a little bit from the beta canon here and there.
Yep.
And then, obviously, time travel's always changing everything in Star Trek.
Yep, absolutely. And it's I think, but that's the thing is like we are now sitting in something that is reasonably canonical between where it's going and where it's been, and so everything's canon until it's not. That's just the truth of these kinds of books. That's just the nature of doing comic books and novels and anything like that.
And there's a hierarchy of canon, right? What's on screen is always going to be what is quote unquote most canonical, what counts the most, and and even the things on screen retcon themselves all the time. But it is our jobs to work within the limits of that and do the best stories we can.
But I think what's really exciting about this ultimately is that we've managed now to bring this to something Star Trek's never had before, which is a large-scale summer event, right? We have two ongoing Star Trek comic books in Star Trek and Star Trek Defiant. We have the Star Trek Limited Series for Dog of War, which is our DS9 book. You've got Echoes, the motion picture book. You've got Lower Decks. You have all of these books that are locking into place all to effectively bring you this event that has something from all of those books to build it all into something that feels really meaningful. This matters to Star Trek.
So do you guys work with, like, Alex Kurtzman and that side to kind of, when you're...
Yeah, so we don't work directly with Alex Kurtzman, but we do have a team at... we work very closely with brand management and publishing over at Paramount. I'm talking with them literally every day, and everything gets run through the different powers that be. So, Lower Decks, Mike McMahon happens to be just a big fan of the comics, and, he sees everything that we do, and he actually approves everything that we do. When we wanted to bring Shax into...
Yeah, we literally got to just call Mike's a very old friend of ours, so it's been this really lovely thing where some of this is just, we get to do this through the very nature of being friends. And then some of it, you do it through Paramount directly. Terry Metalis has been super supportive of the books as well.
Exactly, yeah. When we saw the trailer drop for Picard Season 3, and we saw all the next gen characters making their return on screen, I contacted my people at CBS and Paramount and said, hey, let me know what's going on so we can make sure the books line up and are cohesive and are speaking the same language. And because of that, I got access to the season before it aired, and it's the same with the Strange New World comics and discovering everything. We work very, very closely to make sure everything feels like it counts, everything feels like it matters for the fans.
I mean, I know I'm not related to this comic, but you do a good job with Pike's hair, so.
Thank you.
I mean,
That
Pike's
was
hair
the
should
number
have
one
its
goal.
own
Yeah, that was it.
book entirely. I saw the man once in person, and I almost thought it blew us back, and it was just the force of his hair. It was amazing.
It's true. It's true.
I mean, I guess we could talk about Klingon hair or something, because that is always a debate in the fandom.
Well, actually, Chris has been doing some amazing stuff with Worf's hair.
Well, we wanted to make sure, I mean, yes, in terms of Worf hair continuity, this is taking place with Ponytail Worf. So Ponytail Worf is
Actually,
present.
you joke, but that's been an actual
Yeah.
I believe it.
debate and notes we've been giving across to make sure his hair is exactly how it needs to be.
And then when he
depending on how it's
lets
depicted.
the ponytail down, that it's long enough to be put back into a ponytail feasibly,
Yeah.
visually. So
Love
yes,
that.
We can't. There's
That's
no
the
chopping
detail.
off of the ponytail.
nope, no
Look,
fades.
Hair is really important in Star Trek. I always go back, look, our book is about Benjamin Sisko. Ben Sisko is the emotional core and center, not just of this book, but I think in large part of the line right now. And I think the thing that Sisko taught us all is that if the actor has the wrong haircut, he simply cannot play the role. And the minute that Avery Brooks gets to finally take his hair off and grow his beard, you see not just him be excited about it, but Sisko be excited about it. Yeah. He shows it off to Jake and is like, "What do you think?" And it's so true and honest. And it's look, that's because Star Trek are people. They are living people. They need their hair. They need their facial hair. They need their outfits. They need that sense of things, just like we all do for our identity. Yeah.
Yes.
We are in a halcyon moment of Star Trek where there's so much excellent content in every direction. It's been really an amazing opportunity to be telling these stories specifically as people who, this is our 18th year at a Comic-Con. We were on the floor wandering around as freshmen in college before, just dreaming of the opportunity to tell a story like this. Never thinking we'd ever get the chance. And the fact that we are here getting to tell such amazing content, great stories with Heather, who's pretty dang cool, Chris, pretty darn talented, and my best friend. It turns out that we can just really execute because we love this so much. We are writing the story that we as fans wanted to see. And I hope people love it.
Yeah.
Well, what was it like? Because the four of you kind of started this new era of Star Trek comics. So what has that journey been like?
Why don't you start?
Yeah, so I got handed the keys to the Star Trek license when the previous editor moved to doing different books, and I really wanted to not just make a Star Trek line for Star Trek fans, but I wanted comics fans to understand what makes Star Trek so dang cool. Because previously, the line had been a bunch of isolated miniseries that kind of sit in a vacuum. And not to say none of them were good; they were great. We got the amazing Year 5. But they didn't coexist. They weren't interacting in the traditional sense that you see with, Avengers and Spider-Man and Fantastic Four, or Batman and, Nightwing and Superman. And I wanted to change that. And that's when I called the biggest Star Trek fans I knew, Jackson and Collin, who we had previously worked together on a book at Valiant called Harbinger. And I asked them, what does a book that's just called Star Trek look like? And
That's what you call the original series. But we just capstoned the original series. Year 5 was the fifth year of the 5-year mission, as canonical as we could make it, right? We had done that, and we really had no interest in returning to TOS. We had just put those toys down, connected them to motion picture, and walked away. And so when she said this, it was really remarkable for us because we were like, oh man, do we have to do another TOS? And you cut us off, and you were like, no, that's exactly the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying, what does it mean if we rethink this? And we suddenly realized that we had this opportunity to do the Avengers for Star Trek. We had the Justice League for Star Trek. We had the beginnings of a way to invite not just fans of one series in, but fans of all series. So if your only touch point is Lower Decks, there's something for you. If your only touch point is Prodigy, there's something for you. If your only touch point is Voyager, there's definitely something for you. Collin made sure of that.
But yeah, it's all the magic of the year 2378.
Yep, 2378 did it all for us.
There's
because everybody's on the table.
Yep.
And the important thing was to not just have one book, but have an entire line of books that interacted and could build towards an event like Day of Blood. And that was the mission from the beginning. Defiant didn't just come from anywhere. It was always in the plan. It was always in the
very first pitch had Defiant in it. We had one page on Star Trek, and we had one page, and that one page on Defiant is not what the book turned into, but it was a starting point to start thinking about the book, and then we gave that to Chris, and he basically like completely rebuilt it from scratch, keeping the heart, like the core of the thing, and then turning it into something that was very like direct and personal to Chris, and he like turned it into
We
Defiant.
knew that we needed to tell a story in the light, which meant that Defiant had to kind of exist in the shadows.
Yeah, the way we approached Defiant, I think, is these guys had sketched it out, and we had this. I think what's really key to kicking off Defiant and all of its themes, especially with the characters, is that there is a falling out between Sisko and Worf, right? And obviously they've had a friction-laden relationship, since their DS9 days, and so that was really key. They also, in the pitch, was Spock, because Spock is still alive and kicking. He's about to go off, in a decade or so and kick off the Kelvin timeline, all of that. There's even touch points for that in our book. And I think that with those two characters, like you said, it was supposed to speak to the dark, but it wasn't going to be like a sinister book. The way I was talking about this on the panel yesterday was Star Trek is kind of seen as a utopic vision, right? It's really this kind of grand majesty of where we could go. But what's also amazing about Trek is that there is so much of the universe and the galaxies as they're portrayed of people who have rejected that utopic vision, people who feel like they have been left outside that utopic vision. And so Defiant is the book for those characters, right? And it's a spectrum of characters from Starfleet officers who are loyal but in turmoil, dual identities, people like Worf, who is a Klingon ambassador but also this decorated hero, maybe not the greatest father, right? You have B'Elanna Torres, who is coming back, a hero from Voyager, but now the fanfare of that is faded, and people are saying, hey, remember when you were in the Maquis and you were maybe a traitor to the Federation, right? Like, so all of those things, Ro Laren is in prison. How do we take Ro as someone who defected from the Federation in Next Generation, and where we pick her up in Picard Season 3, right? So
you can't forget about lore.
Of course, and so and then that opens the door to my pitch to these guys was let's do the Dirty Dozen in Star Trek universe, right? Let's do the Expendables. Let's do the characters who have a stolen starship, who are defiant, who are not wearing Starfleet uniforms and are operating in the gray areas of the quadrants, right? And then you get means to an end characters like Lore, and you get ones like Commander Sela, right? Tasha Yar's daughter. So, and there's definitely more where that came from. So I always try to make sure, and I think we both do this, that the books are really always speaking to each other, so that when they mash together in this, and they continue through the rest of the summer, there's so much frisson between the characters, right? Like, you put any character in a scene with another one from either book, and you're going to get a lot of relationship dynamic, a lot of drama just out of those scenes.
I really love seeing Alexander.
Oh, and Alexander. I mean, yeah, we wanted to give Alexander the story that he's due. You know what I mean? I think talk about somebody who's never been able to find his footing. Just because of where he's come from, because of his father, who's kind of there and then not. He's sitting around in the Enterprise, preschool classroom. He's at home with the Rozhenkos. Like, what's that like? It's probably pretty boring. He's probably getting sweaters with birds knitted on them, like Kevin McAllister. Like, he doesn't want to wear those, right? But then he goes.
That's the thing about Alexander is he's kind of a soft boy,
right? But then he goes to the Klingons. He's like, I'm here to be honorable and all this. And they're like, you are the kid who wore the bird sweaters, right? So he doesn't fit in anywhere. So he is ripe for a bad message, and that is really key to this story as well, which is with our primary antagonist, Kahless.
Well, because that's the thing. Oh, go ahead.
No.
Well, so that's the thing about Star Trek: Day of Blood, is that like any Star Trek story, it has to be about something. So on its face, you see a Klingon, you see the red, you see the it's like, oh, this is clearly going to be like a big, violent, scary event. Sure, but it also has to be reflective of the world around us. It has to mean something. It has to be social science fiction, not just science fiction. And so what we discovered as we built into Day of Blood was that we had this really incredible opportunity to talk about something that we're all going through. Like, the way that fascism can rise inside of a society and feel empowering to the very people that it is oppressing.
Especially when you look at someone young and vulnerable without a strong kind of father figure, without someone to really help guide them. Yeah. Our youth are often the most vulnerable to that kind of toxic message.
And so it created this really exciting opportunity to say, okay, we have this dangling thread in Kahless from TNG, which was always stuck in my craw as just a plot point, where it was like, we cloned Klingon Jesus, and rather than deciding that was going to be the end of that story, we decided to make him the head of state and assumed that everything would work out fine. Yeah. It's like, okay, this is the story of how that really doesn't work out fine, but also how different characters address fascism, how a child like Alexander can be brought into that, how he can be warped by it, but without losing missing the fundamental good nature that is at his core.
How he can be empowered by it, too.
Exactly, and how he can feel that it's completing something in him that Worf was never able to see completed. And I think there's something just so relatable and human and real about that for a character who oftentimes becomes the brunt of a joke or becomes a way for Worf to reflect on fatherhood. Right, and since both books are about fatherhood, and we wanted to make sure that both books were about the sons as well. Jake has a big place in Star Trek, and so too does Alexander have a huge place in Defiant.
And I would say even more so, it's about parenthood, right? It's about good parents and it's about bad parents, and it's about how sometimes you're both, right? Because Tom Paris and B'Elanna are in this, and they're both cavorting around the galaxy, and their daughter Morale is not with them. So there's a lot of stress there.
Who has our daughter?
Who has our
what
daughter?
What do you mean you left our daughter? You were supposed to stay with her.
You leave him with Harry Kim.
Oh my God. Commander Sela, obviously, her mother is someone who was a huge hero, died before her time, legend in multiple universes in the Star Trek universe. So, all of that is at play, and it's very much, you're looking at Lore and Data, who are brothers, of a father who was totally absentee, right? And what do they take from that?
What I was going to say, who is the biggest daddy issues of them all? Kahless.
Yeah.
And Kahless.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's self-daddy issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a man who literally, it's the remarkable thing about Kahless, and the thing that we're really excited to continue to dig into, frankly, with this character, is the idea that he is a carbon copy of a mytho-historical figure. But his memories are not the memories of that mytho-historical figure. It's a transcription of a book, right? So it's as if you cloned, literally, if you cloned Jesus, and then you were like, but I can't give Jesus any of his actual memories. The only thing I can do is give him all 4 books of New Testament, right? I can give him the 4 Gospels, and I can put that in his head. That's going to lead to a very confused Jesus clone, right? That's going to that stuff is not internally consistent. That's the whole point of it. It's not necessarily what actually happened. And so how do you reckon with that? Kahless is every single day is being told, you are Kahless, and he knows somewhere deep down that he is not.
Much like many demagogues, which motivates him is a deep fundamental insecurity because he did not get hugged enough by his father.
Yes. Or in this case, by himself.
He's his own dad.
I do want to talk about Shax coming into Day of Blood, because Shax is one of my favorites, and
so the story of how that happened is really kind of funny for obvious reasons. As we were putting the story together, we knew we had Shax on the table because we brought it him in our second arc. He kind of moves into Worf's place as a tactical officer, but at the same time, as we were breaking out all the stories, we didn't really have a place for him to go. Right? We this isn't just an action summer spectacular; it's also a character journey for all these characters. Yeah. And Shax is
He's kind of a straight line.
So we were like, what is he doing? It's like, well, he's probably just kicking ass and beating up Klingons who deserve it.
He's fighting Klingons.
And he's like, that sounds like his best day.
Punching fascists.
Yep, yes. Because Day of Blood is effectively a worldwide planetary riot. So as Klingons just roll out in droves, killing other Klingons, and the whole planet becomes a very chaotic, violent place. Shax is the only Starfleet officer who would be able to access that with any amount of joy or excitement, and he really does. And so he was in the background of all of our scenes, and we kept being like, I guess in the back of this scene, Shax is fighting a dude with a bat'leth. I guess technically in the back of the scene, Shax is back there fighting somebody. And so it became a joke in the writer's room, because we did a physical writer's room for Day of Blood, where we actually built this all together the way that you would a show. We try to do that as much as we can, because we all come from Hollywood to some degree and know how to do that, but we also know how important it is just to look each other in the eye and know if an idea is going to work. Yeah. And one of the things that was really fun about Shax was because we didn't know and we kept sort of deferring it, it became a running joke in the room where we'd be like, well, and then Shax is just having his best day. He's over there having Shax's best day. And he's just having a good time, just fighting Klingons. It's a good time. And we'd make this joke to Heather and be like, and that'll be in the Shax's best day special, right? We'll just do a Lower Deck special. It'll be all about Shax.
Because we like to be dumb. And obviously that's a silly idea.
That's
that
funny.
No one
That's
would
silly.
ever make.
They'll never do that. And then Heather texted us I don't know, a couple of weeks later and was like, Ryan North is in. We're like, Ryan North is in for what? I was like, Shax's best day. We're like, what? And now Shax's best day is a 30 pages?
Yeah. So it's the whole event from Shax's perspective, what he's up to. Because you see him, in Defiant, Deep Blood, and Star Trek, and he's kind of bouncing around in different scenes in the background. And this 30-page one-shot by Ryan and Derek covers the entire event, what Shax is up to the whole time, and it's, you know, full-on comic book event, cartoon violence at its greatest. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything in it except for fighting, jokes, and Shax.
Which is exciting because in Day of Blood, obviously, we have some amazing artists who are able to render these characters like really beautifully.
Ramon Rosales doing the alpha, Angel Huenzueta doing the rest.
And both doing incredible work. But also, it's a Star Trek book, and Star Trek, if you're covering it in blood and violence, you're missing the point of Star Trek. Mm-hmm. Shax is a different story. So luckily, Lower Decks, that kind of tone lended itself well to absolute violent chaos.
Well, and I also think too, like Lower Decks has a very specific tone of a show in and of itself, right? And Shax is often used as very comedic in that regard, and he's not quite always taken so seriously. You know, he's kind of off, right? There's a little something, just little something off about him, and to take that and put it in a more serious tone book, that suddenly becomes a bit darker. And it gave us a lot of opportunities to explore with that character and kind of build him out in a different way.
A Romulan with a sword. It's one of my favorite lines in the whole series so far. I love it.
Yeah, because I guess pitting like his PTSD against like B'Elanna's or something does totally change the tone.
Ro is the only other
Ro,
Bajoran in Starfleet.
Him and Ro have one. It's probably my favorite thing in Day of Blood Alpha is that like one conversation between Ro and Shax where you just get to see this very different approach to being Bajoran in Starfleet between these two, and see how immediately they are oil and water, and how they know each other. They have a back, like they know each other enough to be able to be like, you. And it's like just seeing that from both sides. It made me very happy. It was like it was sort of proof in the pudding that that's why Day of Blood is cool. That's why it works, because you have to take all these characters, and when you throw them at each other, as you were saying, it's like a grab bag of great character interactions. They just
it's like fantasy baseball, but with Star Trek. It's really, really fun. Yeah, it's great.
And then is there anything else you want to add about Day of Blood before we wrap up?
If I'm going to say nothing else, we get to kill a character.
It's true. Character death coming.
Somebody dies.
Yeah. Somebody does die.
Somebody dies, and someone someone we did not create for this book, an important character that will change the trajectory of the book.
Yes.
Yep.
Teaser.
Yep. We're pretty psyched.
And then
for anybody who's following the book, the way to follow it is you can pick up Day of Blood Alpha. It's out now. It's in stores all over the world. I can't believe it. It's blowing my mind. And then you can look for those cool red covers from Malachi Ward. Those covers are on next, Star Trek Defiant, then Star Trek, then Star Trek Defiant, then Star Trek, which is, you can see in that checklist, which is like whole of the event.
6, Star Trek 11, Defiant 7, Star Trek 12.
Yeah.
So
Shax's best day.
and then Shax's best day. Don't miss that one. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And they loop together. You get this great sort of weave of the event, and then both books are going to be coming out fundamentally changed, coming out of this, moving into their next year. And I can't wait for people to see what Chris is doing on Defiant next. It's so cool.
And these guys too, they've got a 2-word pitch for what's coming next that they've been throwing around, and it's really great.
Space.
Dinosaurs.
So there you have it.
Thanks so much, guys, for checking out our latest video. And also, huge thank you to our sponsors of San Diego Comic-Con 2023, Mad Cave and Global Comics.